It's your guy Cole Jackson back with another video on Two Guys Watching Football, where we're going to dive into 5 burning questions that are kind of facing the Ravens going into mandatory OTAs. For everyone out there that's reached out, as you guys, most of you know, follow me on Twitter. I just welcomed the birth of my daughter 2 weeks ago, so it's been a little hectic. It's been a little crazy, but we're home. Everyone's healthy. We're starting to get everything back to normal, which means the videos will be coming back. So to everyone out there that reached out, sent thoughts, sent prayers, sent congratulations. Thank you guys so much. Seriously, from the bottom of my heart, it means the world. It's a great community. And, it's kind of a good time to have a newborn because not a lot going on in the Ravens world. But I did want to talk about kind of some of the key questions facing the Ravens going into mandatory OTAs. And, at the end of the day, it's still OTAs. They're not going full swing training camp, but as each kind of phase of the offseason progresses, it becomes more and more, higher tempo, we'll call it. You kind of get your strength and conditioning program in April and May. Those are the guys you should rehabbing, guys that are just working out in the facility. And then it goes into voluntary OTAs, which, guys are, they're doing drills. Coaches want players there, but it's still not heavy contact. They're not going into heavy system. But kind of once you get into mandatory OTAs, that's when, everyone's expected to be in the building and the tone starts to get set. So I thought it was a good time to do this video. What are some of the key things we're going to be looking for? I'm going to have my tweet alerts to Jeff Zrubik and Jonas Schaefer and all those guys that are there, boots on the ground, to see what's going on during the day. But let's jump into it. So the 5 burning questions facing the Baltimore Ravens going into mandatory OTAs. Up at number 1, who will start to emerge from the injured list and get back on the football field? I think this is probably one of the biggest themes of the Ravens offseason. Many people called it basically a second free agency class, just in the sense that from the latter half of the year last year to now, it feels like fresh bodies that we didn't have last year during that playoff push that ultimately ended up in failure. But there's a lot of guys. There were a lot of tweets during voluntary OTAs of guys that weren't on the field. And so some of those were guys like Lamar Jackson, guys like Michael Pierce that simply weren't in the facility yet for the voluntary portion of OTAs. Some of the guys that weren't on the field were guys like J.K. Dobbins, Marcus Peters, guys that were in the building but, doing rehab work, so not on the field. Because I wanted that to be clear to everybody, because that was kind of the scope of what those tweets were. It's who was on the field, not necessarily who was in attendance. We have guys like J.K. Dobbins, Marcus Peters, who's someone else that's coming back? Yeah, Ronnie Stanley. You could, I guess, Derek Wolfe if he ends up playing. Just guys coming, Gus Edwards, a lot of key guys coming off injuries. And it's going to be interesting to see how those guys kind of step into activity levels. And so to give you a concrete example, we saw last week Jawan James finally getting some practice time in at voluntary OTAs. So that's exciting, and that's the stuff we want to start seeing. So I think it's a key question of how soon can those guys get on the field, because it's important. You want guys to get on the field as soon as possible, start building chemistry, starting to interact with there's quite frankly a lot of new guys on both the offense and defense. So getting guys out there, getting guys familiar with each other, especially in our secondary, I think that's probably one of the key things. What's it going to look like now with Chuck Clark and Kyle Hamilton, and who's starting and who's calling the defense, and what's that look like with Marcus Williams, and there's new corners, and what's the communication look like? So the earlier we get guys back on the field, the better. Same with the offensive line. So that's probably one of the biggest questions facing the Ravens. Not just, who's going to be back, but who starts on PUP, who gets back, at the start of training camp, who waits till later in the preseason. The earlier, the better, obviously, but we also want these guys to make sure they're completely healthy when they get back. So the next question, what does the defensive backfield look like? And this is an interesting one because it was last week or the week before, John Harbaugh called Chuck Clark the starting safety. And so people are kind of like, well, they got Marcus Williams, who's obviously starting at free safety. That would, if so facto, make Chuck Clark your strong safety. Where does that put Kyle Hamilton? So there's going to be a lot of combinations that the Ravens use. There's going to be 3 safety looks. So what's that look like? And I think we'll kind of get a glimpse of that this week. It wouldn't be the first time that a rookie doesn't kind of start right out the gate, quote unquote, start on the top of the depth chart. But what's his involvement? Is it, coming in and he plays more of a split safety look with Marcus Williams, and that moves Chuck Clark into a linebacker, dime backer role. What's that look like? So I think that defensive secondary is going to be a really interesting, we'll call it a mosaic, and it's going to be fluid. So I'm really excited to kind of see what that starts to look like. And I'm sure we'll get a lot of the intel coming out of the tweets of who's on the field, who's playing on the first team. It'll kind of give us our first glimpse. Next question: who is going to get the first crack at replacing Hollywood Brown's snap? So we're looking at basically the Z wide receiver in the offense that's now up for grabs. Rashad Bateman's kind of your X wide receiver. You also have a competition going on at the slot between Duvernay and Prochet, but now Duvernay could be competing with Tylan Wallace at the Z. So, a lot of interesting combinations that are going to exist. Is someone else going to step up? Is a guy like Benjamin Victor going to maybe step up and show something that, he could play with? I don't think so, but, what's that going to look like? So I think kind of seeing who gets that first crack, I'm kind of expecting it's going to be Rashad Bateman, Devin Duvernay, and James Prochet as that kind of first unit until someone gets a chance to emerge, or the Ravens out of free agent or a trade, but I doubt it. So who gets the first crack at those snaps, and how do they do? These are always tough. How many times do we hear about a Miles Boykin over the shoulder catch in OTAs? And so you got to kind of take it with a grain of salt. But kind of seeing depth charts as they roll out is going to be the interesting stuff. And on that same note, what's the first team offensive line look like? I did a tweet about who people are expecting to start at right tackle week 1, and a lot of people, I think it was like 78%. Morgan Moses, 9% for Cole Jackson. Appreciate the love. And then, obviously Falele and Juwan James, who's now healthy and participating, will be competing for that spot. So it's going to be a really healthy rotation at right tackle. We have a healthy competition going on at left guard between Ben Cleveland and Tyree Phillips. And I suppose Ben Powers is there. I don't think he has a shot at winning it, but, I kind of expect those two to go head-to-head. It should be a really fun competition. And then there's always the chance that, McCary could push Linderbaum. I don't think so. I think Linderbaum starts week 1, but, it's possible. So, a lot of healthy battles going on the offensive line. The other one that we're not talking about enough is Ronnie Stanley's probably going to start on physically unable to perform list. Who's that kind of starter at left tackle in his absence? Is it McCary kicking out there to left tackle? Is it Morgan Moses swinging over? Is it Juwan James swinging over? Do they give, Jones Smith, the guy that they brought back from last year that was on the practice squad, does he kind of get the first crack? So, it's going to be really fluid. Kind of concerns me because I really want that unit to build some cohesion, but, it's going to be fun to watch. And then the last question, which before this morning, we all know Lamar Jackson is back. I'm recording this on Monday. But, before this morning, it would have been, is Lamar Jackson going to show up? But we saw him on a plane Sunday night. He's in the Ravens facility Monday morning. It's great news. So the question is, how will Lamar Jackson and his wide receiver corps begin to mesh? And I think that's, again, you hear all the time about reports of crazy catches and all that kind of stuff out of OTAs, but this is going to be big. It's a very green, we'll call it green wide receiver corps. Bateman's kind of the de facto number 1 wide receiver. Obviously, Mark Andrews is going to play a big role. But he only has half a season of NFL experience, which that's no slight to him. That's just the fact. So, it's a young group. It's, a group that you could call very inexperienced, but, that they also have a ton of potential, and it's going to be about how quickly they can get on the same page and Lamar Jackson get on the same page with them. It's great to see them all working out at different points over the summer, over the spring. And, now they're all together in the Ravens facility. They can start getting things going. I throw in an honorable mention. Does Lamar Jackson being back in Baltimore potentially lead to a contract extension? I can only hope and pray, because my God, am I ever sick of talking about it. But, those are kind of the top 5 burning questions for me. I'm just looking forward to Ravens football, following the Twitter stuff. It's a blast. You guys know where to find me at Cole Jackson FB. If you guys like this video, if you kind of like these little previews, hit the like button, hit subscribe to find your way back. That's all I have for you today. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. Peace out, everyone.